In this section and in the last few videos, I have walked you through some basic concepts and operations in Terraform. The very first step to what we did was setting up the provider file and the backend that you can see right here. We configured this configuration block to define our parameters for the Google provider, and we did the same to configure the backend for our Terraform configuration. And then, in order to make this work, we had to get a JSON file from GCP console. This is the key to our main service account that we will use with this Terraform configuration. We downloaded that service account key and we placed it in this folder, and then we referenced that in this configuration block, again both in backend and in the provider block as well. This was a very fast and a very simple approach to get things set up and working very fast. But actually, when you want to go with this to production, this setup is a really bad idea, and you should not be doing this at all in your production and in your work. Yes, it might be good for testing purposes, but sometimes even for testing purposes, this might be a very bad idea. So in this video, I will show you the better way of authenticating and authorizing your Terraform configuration so that it can work with GCP without using this JSON key file. Now, before I go there, let's talk about why this is a bad idea in the first place. First of all, this is a one-time setup. We will never come back to this step again. And you will see this evident in the coming videos. I will never be showing you back the provider file, the backend file, and I will never open this key file as well, and you will never see its content. So the point that I want to make is that this one-time setup involves a highly privileged credential file. With time, this will be forgotten, and you may want to share or publish your configuration, and you don't really want to include that JSON key file by mistake, whether it's a public or private repo, or whether it's through a shared zip file, for example, or whatever. Because with time, you will forget about the existence of this. You will forget many aspects of how you built this configuration, honestly. This is a plug on keeping everything documented, obviously. And the second point that I want to mention and make is the use of service account keys by itself is not recommended by Google. And in fact, it is actually very much discouraged, and Google will recommend everything possible before they tell you that, yeah, you can use service account keys if nothing else we recommend works for you, but it's still not a good idea. In addition to that, there is an organizational policy in the Cloud Console, which I hope you are familiar with, which does restrict or prevent the creation of service account keys, which is called disable service account key creation. Once you set it to true, nobody in the organization will be able to create any service account key. If you look at what you want to achieve when implementing Terraform, and let's, for example, assume you want to build a landing zone that follows Google's best practices, it would be a little bit ironic if you used a service account key to authorize Terraform, which is going to create an organizational policy to restrict the creation of such service account keys. So yeah, I mean, even if you manage to do it for the first time, for the first run, imagine that at some point you want to manage that service account key, or if you want to maintain or replace that service account key. And if you come after the deployment is done and after that organization policy is implemented, then you will not be able to replace that key, and your whole configuration will be somehow crippled or dysfunctional because you are lacking the very important and core component, which is the authorization mechanism to GCP. So yeah, it's not a good idea. The last point that I want to mention here, well, the last point here, but not the least in this topic, is that if you want to use service account keys for whatever reason, and if you want to protect yourself from service account key leakage or anything that's related to the risks that come with using service account keys, then you will need to implement key rotation and management processes and solutions which will introduce another level of effort and complexity just to be able to manage those keys that you want to use with this one-time setup in Terraform. And if you don't implement such policy or process, then your keys are just screaming to be leaked and abused. Bad things can happen at this stage. So what is the solution after all of this long introduction and all of this, hopefully, reasonable talk against service account keys? Well, there is something called short-lived credentials. These things are awesome, and you don't need to worry about many things when you're using short-lived credentials. The major thing you will forget about is keys management and rotation and stuff like that. Short-lived credentials work with almost anything that can be implemented with gcloud, and they are also very easy to implement and set up, and you'll see it right now when I will demonstrate this for you. They are not permanent things. They expire after a period amount of time, making them useless for an attacker if they, for whatever reason, got the value of that. So I will show you how you can modify your Terraform configuration to get rid of the service account JSON key file and replace that with the access token generated through these short-lived credentials. This will be done by impersonating the core Terraform service account from your own account. So my account is admin@my-domain, the one that you're seeing here. I will run Terraform as this account while impersonating the core service account, which got access to everything in the organization. This will obviously require a role to be assigned for me on that service account that is called service account token creator. So once I have this role, I will be able to impersonate that service account and generate that temporary access token or that temporary short-lived credential so that I can use it with Terraform. Obviously, for this to work, you will also need gcloud to be installed on the system, which is installed in my case. Obviously, I have talked about it in the previous videos as well. So it's a really good idea to have it installed just in case you need it, similar to what we have right now. Now, the last theory point that I want to talk about before showing you how to do this is when this approach is not required, when you don't even need to use short-lived credentials with your workflows or with your configuration. And I hope the answer to this is somehow obvious, which is if you are running Terraform from inside GCP, then obviously you don't need any of this. You can just skip this video and move on. You see, when you run Terraform from a VM in Google Compute Engine, for example, that VM instance has a service account attached to it. You can simply grant that service account whatever required roles and permissions for your Terraform to work. And then once you run Terraform from inside that VM with that service account with those permissions, Terraform will just use the VM's identity to connect to GCP and execute stuff. Same case for Cloud Build or Cloud Run or Cloud Functions. All of them have their own service accounts. So you just grant the required permissions on these service accounts and just let Terraform do its thing. So with all of this boring talk completed now, let's switch to our workspace and let's start changing our configuration to get rid of the very bad service account key file here. What I'm going to show you is not going to change how resources are created. It's not going to change how Terraform works. It's just going to change the authentication logic for Terraform to connect to GCP. There is another note that I want to make here, which is even though I did not go through this in the rest of the videos in this series, but again, if you change your configuration, nothing will be any different from what I'm going to show you in the rest of the videos. Your configuration will work exactly as if it is using a JSON key file, because it's the authentication layer, right? So you just do it one time and whatever logic that comes after that, it is the same. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you are aware of this point, because in the coming videos, you will still see me having this JSON key file and all. Just ignore it. Assume that I'm using the same method that I'm going to show you now, which is the short-lived credentials, and everything will be the same for you. So let's start with our demo now. There are some number of steps that we need to go through. Let's start with the very first important step, which is getting rid of this service account key. So right click and delete. Yes, I want to move it to trash. And then let's get rid of these lines that are referencing to the service account key file, which is not existing anymore. So simply comment this by adding a hash at the start. It will turn green, or you just delete the whole line if you want to just completely get rid of this, which is what I'm going to do. So this is the backend, and then the provider as well, credentials, getting rid of this, and then saving the files. So let's do something. Let's do Terraform init, and because I changed the backend file, so I need to do Terraform init and then dash reconfigure, so that it does its own stuff with the backend. And you will see there is an error that it is unable to query the Google Cloud Storage because the error of 401, which is access denied. I don't have access now, or Terraform does not have access to the backend because there is no credential at all configured to let it use to connect to GCP. So to fix this, as mentioned, we will need to use the short-lived credentials and generate an access token to the service account using my own account. To be able to do that, there is one specific role that I need to grant to the core service account. So this is the Cloud Console. Let's switch back to the core project, which is here. Okay. And then let's go to service accounts. Again. This is my core service account that I'm using. So I will go inside it, and in the permissions tab, I will just need to grant one role to my own user. Now my access to this service account is set to owner, and it's coming from this project because I am owner on this project. This is not enough because if you see now, when I execute the command that I want to use, I will still get an error. So owner by itself is not going to be enough. So pasting this, the command is gcloud auth print access token and then impersonate service account. This is the service account that I want to impersonate. So when I press enter, it is going to throw an error that I don't have the right role to do this impersonation, which is shown here. So all I need to do is just go to that service account, grant myself that role, and that will be it. So admin, and this is me. And the role that will be is service accounts and then service account token creator. This is the one. Once you do that, just give it 1 or 2 minutes to reflect on the service account. And then once we execute the command again, you will see now it's going to work without an error once I give it enough time to reflect, obviously. So once this command is executed, you will see a very long access token that's going to be printed on screen. This is the actual credential that I will be using to pass to the commands that I will be using with Terraform. So, but then this is coming as a value on the console here, and it's coming with this command as a result of this command. So how exactly am I going to make it work with Terraform? Well, this is a good question. And to explain this to you, let me take you to this page, which is the documentation page for Google Provider, the configuration reference for Google Provider. And in that reference, there is that section that is called authentication configuration. If you see the first line here, this is the credentials line. This is what we were using before I deleted that. This is by referencing to the service account key file, which is deleted now. But then what are the other options that we can use here? Well, there is the access token, which is the one that I'm going to show you. There is the impersonate service account. There is the impersonate service account delegates. And all of these options that can be used with this. But then what we're going to use is access token. And access token, it is a variable in Google Provider in Terraform that is also linked to an environment variable that is called Google OAuth access token. So whenever we put value in this environment variable, that value will be accessed by this Terraform variable, access underscore token. So you got the point, right? I mean, what we're going to do is we're going to assign that access token value to this environment variable. And that's it. We will be on our way to run Terraform, and that's all going to be taken care of automatically for us. So let's check back on our configuration here, and let's see if the permission change did take its time and reflect on the service account. And yes, it did indeed. And as you can see, this is the very long credential that we need to use. Now, how do you assign this to an environment variable? Well, I think it's depending on the operating system that you're using. So in Linux is a very straightforward thing as just copying this. Well, I have it off screen. That's why I'm saying copying this. Copying this and pasting in your shell. But obviously it's not going to work in my case. Export Google OAuth access token and then equals and the result of this gcloud command. If you have Windows, which is my case, then you have two options. You do it from PowerShell or command prompt. If you have it, or if you have command prompt, then again, copying this because I have it off screen. You don't expect me obviously to go type all of this in front of you, but this is how you do it for command prompt. It will create an environment variable and assign the value of this gcloud command. But then if you have PowerShell, or if you're using PowerShell, which is my case, the command for that is also simple, but a little bit different. This is the command to use it if you're having PowerShell environment, or if you're executing from PowerShell. Once you press enter, then it will run, generate the access token, assign it to this environment variable. How do we check the value? Well, it is also very straightforward. You copy this value, and then I think it's typing echo and the value. And you can see the content of this. That's it. Now what we can do is again type our Terraform thing, Terraform init -reconfigure, and everything is green. What do you know? We don't have any service account files. We don't have any references to any service account. Everything is good for us. Let's do Terraform plan. It will now tell me it wants to create a VM. And let's apply our plan. Yes. Okay, while this is going on, let me take you to the console and maybe we will catch some of the changes that are happening. This is the target project that I'm using. So if I go to VPC network and VPC networks, we should be seeing the main VPC, which is right here. And if we go to the VMs, compute engine, we should be seeing the VM being created. Oh, not yet, yeah. Well, it didn't get there yet, but it's everything is good for us now, and we are able to use Terraform without any service accounts or anything. So I hope you found this video useful and insightful. As you've seen, once you implement this change, you will not see any change in Terraform's behavior at all, but you will be more secure and you don't have to worry about service accounts risks or anything. And again, as I mentioned, although in the coming videos I will still be using service accounts because obviously I recorded those videos before I record this video, but the behavior of Terraform plan and apply is exactly the same. Nothing is going to change. The only consideration you need to have is if you ended your session with Terraform, so the configuration is done. If I refresh now, you will see the VM is there. Yeah. So the point that I was making is, for example, if you closed everything now, and if tomorrow you came in and you wanted to resume working, you just need to execute that command depending on your environment to create the auth token or the access token and assign it to this variable. And then you can start doing Terraform plan and apply commands again. You have to do this before every session, otherwise you will get access denied errors, which is, again, it's a very reasonable demand or a very reasonable thing to ask, considering the great security benefits you will get once you implement this approach instead of using service account keys.